Sciacca is the curator of European art from 300 to 1400. And I don't even know why those years precisely, but I guess we could guess.
You can get into
It
that.
should be 312.
Maybe until
Christina,
1500 too, but.
but at the Walters Art Museum in Baltimore, Maryland. And she has received almost every degree that Columbia University has to offer, a PhD, an MPhil, and a master's, all in art history. And she has her BA as well in art history from Cornell University, which I'm told is gorgeous. Sorry for the cheap joke. She is curator of you were curator of illuminated manuscripts at the J. Paul Getty Museum for 10 years. I don't know why anyone would leave that place, but I'm sure you had a good reason to do so.
Maybe the job I have now.
Is even a better job. And has also worked at the Met Cloisters and the British Library. Her research is wide-ranging. It includes Italian, German, and Ethiopian medieval art with a focus on liturgy and devotional practice and patronage, something all of us should know about. She has published several books, including Building the Medieval World, Illuminating Women in the Medieval World, and Florence at the Dawn of the Renaissance, Painting and Illumination. Her exhibition, which we really care about, Ethiopia at the Crossroads, is currently at the Peabody Essex Museum. For all those of you who are here in Boston, it is a wonderful museum. It's an easy trip, and this is such a great opportunity to see something really interesting. So today she will be presenting on Ethiopia and the art of cross-cultural exchange, with a particular focus on everything that we're going to learn from this exhibition. Dr. Sciacca, we are delighted to have you here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind introduction. Ambassador Storelov, I pronounced correctly.
So no you.
Thanks also to the African Studies Center. It's wonderful. I was warned that there might only be 10 people in the room, but there's so many of you. So thank you all for coming in person. I'm going to stand up, and I thank you all to those of you who are on the Zoom. We're going to see how this owl works. Is it working? It works. All right. So I do like to move around when I speak a little bit, so that's why I'm doing this. Question I frequently got: why are you leaving the Getty? Well, I'll tell you why. So 25 years ago, I was a graduate student in art history. I thought I was going to work on, medieval manuscripts, and I thought, as you said before, I was a young, stupid graduate student, and I thought I knew everything about illuminated manuscripts. And then I took an African art survey as my sort of non-Western requirement at Columbia. And my professor, Zoe Struthers, who some of you might know, she, a couple classes in, she put up Ethiopian illuminated manuscripts on the screen, and my brain kind of exploded, because I had never heard about such a thing, me thinking that I understood everything about illuminated manuscripts. I had no idea about the tradition, not just in manuscript illumination, wall painting, sculpture, all sorts of things from Ethiopia. So that began my love affair with Ethiopian art. Even though I remained with my main focus in European illuminated manuscripts, I also took on Ethiopian art as a minor field of study. And so was grilled by Professor Steller during my oral exams, and I always kind of had Ethiopian art kind of on the back burner, kind of simmering away as I was going on into my career as a curator. So when I got to the Getty, there were 2 manuscripts, Ethiopian manuscripts, in the collection of the Getty Museum. And I was helpful in acquiring a 3rd manuscript. All 3 of those manuscripts are in the Ethiopia at the Crossroads exhibition. My former colleagues were incredibly generous with their loans. Many of you know that the manuscripts are light-sensitive materials, and so it is very difficult when you are a curator and you're trying to do a multi-venue exhibition to get institutions to lend manuscripts from more than one venue. So we're very grateful to have the Getty manuscripts at all 3 venues of the exhibition. The exhibition is not quite open at the Peabody Essex. Please don't go tomorrow or later this afternoon there. It actually opens to the public on Saturday. So I am also here. This is a wonderful kickoff event for me to kind of get my, juices flowing again with Ethiopia after a brief break in Hawaii, which I just got back from. Little jet lag, sorry, and to see it in its new iteration at the Peabody Essex Museum. So that will officially open to the public on Saturday. There are opening events. I'm giving a public tour of the exhibition, and it will be configured differently. They have more space than we had at the Walters. So I'm really looking forward to seeing exactly what they've done with it. So what I'm going to show you today is actually how it looked at the Walters, because I don't really know actually what it looks like at the Peabody Essex, and I don't want to sort of preempt them. This exhibition, like I said, I always kind of had Ethiopian art kind of simmering on the back burner. When I was at the Getty and we acquired this third Ethiopian manuscript, I worked with our education department to outreach into the Ethiopian community in Los Angeles, which was a really just transformative experience for me. Organized a little seminar with the great Dr. Getachew Haile and also Marilyn Feldman, who are two of my mentors in learning about Ethiopian art, both of whom have sadly passed. Really quite sad they were not able to see this and to participate in the catalog and the exhibition, but they live on hopefully through me. This exhibition is actually something that I pitched during my job interview at the Walters, and I like to joke that they hired me because I pitched the show. At that time, it was the easiest exhibition approval I have ever been through in my entire career. I kind of arrived on day one. They said, "Well, that Ethiopia show, go for it, do it." I was like, "Okay, I've done it. You don't have to ask me twice." So this exhibition is, it's not really a testament to my own curatorial abilities, but rather to the fact that this show was kind of a no-brainer for the Walters. So some of you might know that the Walters did a show back in 1993 called African Zion, and I see Gabe sort of nodding away back there. This was an exhibition, really the first one in this country to introduce American audiences to Ethiopian art. The catalog was actually one of my textbooks when I was studying in graduate school, and so we do have this tradition. What a lot of people don't know is that at the time of African Zion, the Walters had exactly one Ethiopian object in the collection. It was collected by one of our founders, Henry Walters, and he bought it thinking that it was a Coptic Egyptian cross. Actually an Ethiopian cross, but it was sort of an accidental acquisition. But after 1993, when we did this exhibition, we started to be gifted Ethiopian artworks. We started to purchase Ethiopian artworks, and within a span of about, I would say, 5 years, with the acquisition of most of the collection that we have today of Ethiopian art, which is over about 225 objects today. I am only responsible for a very small handful of those at the very end. So it's really quite remarkable how the collection was built at the speed it was built. And we are now one of the largest collections of Ethiopian art outside of Ethiopia. So that's one reason why this was a no-brainer to do this exhibition, especially now that it's 30 years after African Zion, and we sort of think differently a bit about Ethiopian and Eritrean art. The other part, which you might know as well, is that the Baltimore, DC area is the home to the largest Ethiopian and Eritrean diaspora community in the US. And it's also, the numbers vary, but there's at least 100,000. Some people number as highly as 200,000. So this kind of made sense for our community as well. And I want to bring up at this point that, excuse me, had a lot of help with this exhibition. So the exhibition at the Walters had about 225 objects, 25 lenders. So yes, based on the Walters and that global collection, as you'll see, I'll explain why that was the case. But also based in large part on loans from other US institutions, European institutions, and also importantly, Ethiopia as well. So this was a pretty monumental undertaking, and I had actually 3 advisory committees. One was a more academic advisory committee. These were other curators, art historians, professors in various fields, all bringing their expertise to the table. And I should tell you sort of my approach and how it was different from African Zion in that for the African Zion show, there was really just a focus on, first of all, just on Ethiopia and also mostly on Ethiopian Christian art. But as most of you in the room will know, there's a much bigger picture in Ethiopia. And so I really wanted to show different aspects of Ethiopia and also what were its relationships with its surrounding culture. So this might be a good moment to advance my slide and remind you all of the geography a bit. This we didn't test out in this mode. Does that work?
There's enough here. Go down to the bottom. It's because you're on Zoom, so.
I mean, this is my screen.
are
Is
you-
there a
are you
remote?
On PowerPoint or?
You think
Can I
that's
do it from
okay?
there?
No, it would be on, Sciacca's screen.
Is there a remote in this room? Is this that?
I don't think so. I think it's because you're on Zoom. If you- Is that here? Sorry about that.
You have to get out every time she wants to advance.
No. You're still sharing, right?
Yeah.
So do you want to try to, you just need to bring the, so we put it on slideshow mode.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And as long as it's this.
Oh,
There. You're good.
we're okay now. So, most of you will be very familiar with this map, but a lot of people are not. And so just to point out Ethiopia's situation here, at the Horn of Africa and East Africa, this is the juncture of, I like to say, sort of Asia, Europe, and Africa all coming together. Ethiopia was incredibly well connected throughout its history. My big medieval soapbox is that medieval people traveled. We like to think that we're the only ones who travel because we have modern means of doing that. But people did travel for various reasons. And so Ethiopia had quite close connections, just a hop, skip, and a jump across the Red Sea to what we called in the earlier period, South Arabia or modern day Yemen, across the Indian Ocean to the Indian subcontinent, up the Nile, through sort of the North and East Africa into the Mediterranean Sea, and with access to Europe as well. And so this really, I like to think of Ethiopia as kind of that fulcrum around which things in this region are spinning. And I think we need to kind of put our brains back into that mode to think of it more in that way. So very different from the African Zion approach. And I think you'll see that throughout the slides. So I should say also the help that I had with this exhibition. So I had my more academic advisory committee. Most of those folks actually became the authors of the essays and the exhibition catalog, which as of last week, we received the bulk shipment. So it should be at the Peabody Essex. After all the trials and tribulations, it got stuck in the Red Sea, had to go around through the Panama Canal, and then the Port of Baltimore has had issues, as you all know, in the last week or so. But thankfully, the catalog is co-published with Yale University Press, so the shipment came into New York. Yay! So I know that it's already in several bookstores, so keep your eyes out for it. This is sort of an overview of what our galleries look like at the Walters Art Museum. Our special exhibition galleries is kind of like a big donut as you see it here. And the colors that you see, I think many of you will recognize as the color of many African flags, but in fact, in this case, it's obviously referring to the flag of Ethiopia. And I bring this up because my second very helpful committee was my community advisory committee. And these were all folks from the DMV area. I had nurses, teachers, health clinic workers, all of whom felt invested in this particular topic and who advised me on various ways, the content of the show, how to present the material, how to tell their stories in the best possible way. Obviously, I've been studying this material for over 25 years now, but I am not Ethiopian myself. So it was really important for me to make sure that I was telling those stories that they wanted to be told. So please come in. So the colors that you see here are a reflection of my work with that community advisory committee, in that I asked them questions like, what's the look and feel of the exhibition you would like to see? What colors would you like to see in the exhibition? And so they said, well, there should be lots of light. And I said, don't tell our conservators that, they'll panic. And then they said the colors of the Ethiopian flag should be well represented. So our designer, amazing designer, Katie Neighbor, came up with this idea that you sort of walk through the colors of the Ethiopian flag as you go through the exhibition, from green to yellow to red, and also using white walls, and that kind of conveyed that sense of light. And if any of you who have visited really any museum exhibitions of pre-modern art or especially medieval art, you know that white is not a color you see frequently on the walls, nor are very bright primary colors. And I actually had to kind of fight for those colors because it was like, well, you want to tone it down a little bit, maybe less, muted shade of those. I said, no, let's be true to the flag. And also, if you look at Ethiopian art, especially painting, I think what you will see is those colors are represented in Ethiopian art. I see Gabe sort of nodding away. Yes, in fact, they're represented in the Ethiopian art going way back into the Middle Ages. And so it actually, I think, worked incredibly well. I've heard no complaints about this presentation, but you can see the white walls and the use of the color as well. So I had, being, I can sort of come at it from a scholarly standpoint, curating an exhibition like this, but the reality is we have a very varied audience. Every museum does. So on the one hand, I had my Ethiopian and Eritrean visitors who know pretty much everything about this material. They could have curated this show themselves. And on the other hand, I have folks who know nothing about Ethiopian art and culture. So I had to kind of find that balance. So one way that I did that at the Walters was I created a very long introductory section. So that's this sort of full green section that you see here at the beginning. And in that section, what I did was show some of the major religions in Ethiopia, some of the legendary stories, some of the language, the geography. So people get a sense of having that sort of toolbox moving forward into the yellow section, which begins a kind of chronological sweep where you look at the different relationships Ethiopia had throughout its history, from the earliest connections that we know about in South Arabia, moving on to Byzantium, Italy, and of course, globally, entirely globally in the present day. So this is kind of the setup section. I'll show you a few of the things that were in that section. So first of all, we begin with the story of the Queen of Sheba, or Makeda, as we have it here. We actually have two such paintings like this. This was in the Walters collection, had it resided in our storage. I don't think it's ever been on view, actually. And I thank our senior paintings conservator, Karen French, for telling me that it even existed. And in the exhibition, you'll see it paired with a very similar example from the Peabody Essex Museum. So they also have one of these in their collection. I think they may have more than one, actually. And this is basically telling the legend of the Queen of Sheba meeting King Solomon. And a lot of you will know that story, but if you don't know the story, the Queen of Sheba was actually a queen who was claimed by many different places, but Ethiopia certainly claimed her as their own. And she learned of the great wisdom of King Solomon, and she decided to pay him a visit. So she travels to meet King Solomon. They have sort of a political debate. They're matched in terms of their intellect, but King Solomon has other designs on the Queen of Sheba. And so he manages to trick her. This is a short version of the story. He tricks her into sleeping with him. They conceive a child. His name becomes Menelik first. And he is born in Ethiopia, but when he becomes of age, he decides he wants to go back and meet his father. And so he travels to meet King Solomon. They have a wonderful homecoming, and this is all very wonderful. However, Menelik is homesick for home. So he decides to go back, and King Solomon says, well, I wish you wouldn't go, but if you do, please take my best men with you. And that's all well and good, but the best men do not want to leave the Ark of the Covenant behind, so the tablets on which the Ten Commandments are written. So you can see that happening here. They leave in the dead of night. They go on a boat. They take the tabot, which is known in Ethiopia as the tabot, or the Ark of the Covenant, with them on the boat, and they go all the way back to this place right here. Can anyone recognize what that place is? By its monuments, and its monumental stele? Awesome, yeah. So now those tablets are in a particular church in Aksum today. They are guarded by one individual, one priest, and once he passes, another one takes over. So that is not something that one could access. You can imagine that this is an incredibly important thing to claim. You have the Ark of the Covenant on your soil. So this is a very important story to understand about Ethiopia. How many of you have heard of Lucy? So Lucy, yes, So Lucy is the skeleton of Australopithecus afarensis, so found in the Afar region of Ethiopia. She's known in Ethiopia as Dinkanesh, or you are marvelous, because she is in fact the earliest upright human, a walking human that has ever been discovered, and so found on Ethiopian soil. So again, another very important foundational thing to know about Ethiopia, which is represented in the exhibition. By a contemporary piece by Faith Ringgold. And in the exhibition at the Walters, it's right at the front. I think it's at the end of the Peabody Essex, but you'll see that as well. Did not bring the skeleton of Lucy, although there's actually many copies of it, as I discovered. I could have probably borrowed one of those, but represented in a modern take by an African-American artist on the great importance of Lucy. So in this first section of the exhibition, we touch upon the different sort of three Abrahamic faiths in Ethiopia, all of which have a very, very long history. Here you're looking at a reference to Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity, and I like this slide because what we did in the exhibition was have sort of big wall murals to give people a sense of the place. I wanted this to be a very immersive exhibition, especially for people who have never been to Ethiopia before. This mural, I think, will also appear at the Peabody Essex. And when you look at this church procession here, this occurs at the end of most masses in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, where the priests and actually the whole congregation comes out and circulates around the church in the outdoors. There are umbrellas shading the priest, that's from the Peabody Essex, and also we have here a woman's dress worn on special occasions in Ethiopia, also from the Peabody Essex. And then if you look at the mural, you'll see various sorts of things. You'll see processional crosses, you'll see the priests holding hand crosses, you will see even some people with sistra, or these rattles used as a percussive device in Ethiopian chant. And we have examples of all those things in the exhibition. So hopefully this kind of all pulls together when you see it. So you're all gonna go. Let's say when you go see it. And here's an example of one of these hand crosses in the exhibition. These are both from the Walters collection. This is a kind of unusual example where the sort of middle part of the cross where you would hold it right here is in the shape of in human form. And you'll notice at the bottom here, this square, that's a very typical feature of hand crosses, referring to the tabot, or the Ark of the Covenant, which a replica of which is in every Ethiopian Orthodox church. And then, of course, at the top there, you have this interlaced cross, which is very common in not just hand crosses, but also in processional crosses as well. And you'll notice in the exhibition, I hope, they are typically dressed. So it's very important. You probably saw that in the shot just before, where you have textile hangings going through. This is how you know an Ethiopian cross is by these loops at the bottom there, which are meant to hold that textile hanging. I showed this particular processional cross. There's several in the exhibition. This is my favorite one from the Walters. I sat down one time and looked at this because, of course, you have the general form of the cross. You also have smaller crosses kind of embedded in it. But even that interlace, every time that interlace crosses, you get yet another cross. And so I sat down one time and just counted how many crosses there were here. It was about 97. So this form of the cross is incredibly important in Ethiopian visual culture, in Ethiopian Christianity. And that is sort of a great example of how that manifests in visual form. Islam in Ethiopia also has an incredibly long history. We have, I realize actually this Zoom screen is cutting off my titles on the top, but here's Islamic art. And we have this tradition going back to the time of Muhammad. Muhammad actually sent exiles from Saudi Arabia to Ethiopia to find refuge. They were welcomed there and eventually founded a city that many of you might know called Qatar, which is actually one of the holy cities of Islam today. And this became an incredible place of learning, of Quran production. And so I have here in the exhibition, this is where the loans come in. We have an incredible collection of Islamic art and manuscripts at the Walters, but none from Ethiopia. So this is where I had to sort of reach out, and we have a Quran here from Qatar, next to actually a Quran that is in our collection, probably from, could be Nigeria, someplace in West Africa. I think you can see a lot of resonances there just to show that Ethiopia in some ways is that jumping off point for the manuscript traditions that you find elsewhere in Africa in Muslim culture. If we travel to Ethiopia's southwest, you will find a very different tradition that I know I did not learn about when I was studying African art as a graduate student. You have a three-dimensional sculptural tradition, and so I show you one of two figures that are in the exhibition from the Konso culture in southwest Ethiopia. The southwest is also the birthplace of coffee, so I give thanks to the southwest of Ethiopia every single day, sometimes several times a day. And this incredible sculptural tradition that might remind you of other types of African sculpture that you've seen from other parts of Africa. This is a memorial figure. This is the woman or the wife. We have it paired with the husband, and he would sort of be the central figure. And then there would be multiple other smaller figures representing either the man's entourage or people that he had conquered. These are, like I said, memorial sculptures and still very much being carved today. These are on loan from the Brooklyn Museum. So again, we did not have this in our Walters collection. There is a section in the exhibition about Ethiopic language. So one of the very ancient languages that you should all know about, is Ge'ez. This is a language that was codified in first, second century CE. It was based in part on South Arabian language, or Safian, again, right across the Red Sea. And it's a language that appears in Ethiopian art, not just in places like manuscripts, obviously in text, but also there are very small inscriptions everywhere here on all of these figures. And so the place of Ge'ez is incredibly important. In the exhibition, we have, I should say, our community voices are represented not just in how we sort of formulated the exhibition, but also their voices are represented in the exhibition directly. We have 5 video screens where we've recorded the voices of some of our community advisory members. And in this section of the exhibition, I hope it's together, we have my Ge'ez teacher, Dawi Muline, who is a graduate student at Howard University. He's also an Ethiopian Orthodox deacon. He went back to Ethiopia to study. He was born in the US, but is Ethiopian American, and he went back to become a deacon in Ethiopia, came back, and he teaches on multiple platforms. Because he actually has his own website. If you want to take some courses with him, you can do that. So, and we have him on the video actually reading text in Ge'ez from our own collection. So that was a really, you can actually hear the sounds of that language as well. So what you'll see in the exhibition is pairing of historic Ethiopian art with contemporary Ethiopian art throughout the exhibition. And I did that not just to sort of put it at the end chronologically, but also to show that relationship that exists between the two. So many Ethiopian contemporary artists actually are thinking back to historic Ethiopian art. And one example of such an artist is Hosseini Khosrow. And this particular painting is called Wax and Gold. And I'll save embarrassment from Gabe and not explain what that concept is, but the very basic sort of interpretation is that the wax is sort of the surface layer of information, what anybody can sort of perceive, and then the gold is the true meaning, sort of beneath the surface. And so what Hosseini does here is he actually takes the forms of Amharic letters. So you see those on your walls here. That Amharic is based on that Ge'ez alphabet. And it's, of course, the language most widely spoken in Ethiopia today. Ge'ez is mostly a liturgical language today, just used in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, although it was part of historical language going back. He takes those letter forms and he kind of abstracts them. So if you sort of look, you don't quite know what you're looking at first, but then actually as you look further and further, there's actually the word for Ethiopia in here, which I learned sort of well into the process. I don't read Amharic, I know some Ge'ez, but and so you'll see some of the individual letter forms here quite clearly. So but it takes you a while. You have to really look at it and sort of get that meaning. So there's your wax and gold. So you'll see, like I said, these contemporary pieces integrated throughout the exhibition, both at the Walters and also at the Peabody as well. So in the Walters iteration, there's your sense of place. There's those oxamite stele right there on the wall. We are moving into the yellow section. So this takes us to a place where we are starting to look at that chronological sweep. We start with the South Arabian objects there. In this case here, we have coins from ancient Aksum. So Aksum was in fact one of the 4 great ancient empires. So we all know Greece, Rome, probably Persia as well, but Aksum was the 4th. And so this is really important to kind of put back, I think, in people's minds if they are not aware. And I actually stole the idea for this kind of design from another exhibition called Caravans of Gold. I don't know if any of you saw that. That was good. Oh, yeah, left with nodding heads. I saw that show at every single venue it was at, and at the Aga Khan Museum installation. They had also a coin display set in front of sort of a Saharan landscape on the wall. I said, ooh, I want to do that for the Ethiopia show. So again, our amazing mount maker, Adam, and Katie, our designer, came up with this case where they can sort of float and be against the backdrop of the place where these coins were made. And you can also walk around them as well and see them from both sides. We also had a very important didactic here. The coins, by the way, are like this big. So we had this booklet here as well that I think the Peabody might have as well, where you get blow-ups of them. You get to understand how to decode coins if you're not a numismatist. I certainly knew nothing about numismatics before I started this exhibition, not part of my training as a medievalist. But they're really remarkable because these coins are actually the main record we have of the names of those Aksumite emperors are coming from those coins. So a very important way to start the show. And here's South Arabia, a little bit closer, so now you couldn't see what was in the case there. We have some South Arabian alabasters from the Walters collection, side by side with a manuscript produced actually around the year 1500 or maybe a little bit later, in Gunde, which is on the sort of on the border between modern day Ethiopia and Eritrea. If you look at the way in which these animal forms appear, I think you'll see some resonances there, and also the way that they're kind of put in these boxes also refers to the format that you see here. There's actually a niche in the National Museum of Ethiopia in Addis Ababa that has an entire frieze kind of running around the exterior of the niche where you have this repeated form of the ibex. And that was found in Ethiopia, while this was found in South Arabia. So there's a lot of communication going back and forth in the ancient period between those two places. And here's our coins. So you can trace not only the names of the emperors to these coins, but you can also trace the adoption of Christianity in Ethiopia. And I didn't sort of say this when I was talking about Christian art in Ethiopia, but in fact, Ethiopia is the second oldest Christian nation. A lot of people don't know that. So King Azana of Ethiopia adopted or converted himself to Christianity in the early 4th century CE. He declared Ethiopia a Christian nation, so it's the second oldest after Armenia. And those two have a great relationship, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And in the coins in the exhibition, you can see two of Azana's coins, one in the pre-Christian period, and then after he adopts Christianity, where you get that form of the cross. This is not Azana's coin, it's slightly later, but you get that symbolism of the cross replacing the crescent and the disc, which is what had been on the coins before, another South Arabian symbol. And I just show the resonances between Roman coins as well in that display. So the exhibition goes on, so as I said, chronologically, we look at the relationship between Ethiopia and Byzantium, Ethiopia and Armenia. This is again how this appeared in the exhibition. You'll notice that Katie came up with this idea to create these archways, and my contribution here was to talk about different periods of Ethiopian architecture. So you're looking at kind of a Lalibela arch. The first archway, the green one, was Aksum, and then the final one is a Gondarine arch. So I'll get back to that a little bit later. And to show you the resonances with Armenian art, the Armenian Orthodox and Ethiopian Orthodox churches are part of the same branch of Orthodox Christianity, and like I said, had that close connection being the first and second Christian nations. Armenian traders also traveled throughout the area, and they were able to transport things like obviously goods, but things that are portable, like manuscripts, icons, crosses, all these sorts of things. So this is how these motifs kind of circulate throughout the area. And I show you here two manuscripts. On the left, an Armenian manuscript from 966 CE. It is the earliest illuminated Armenian manuscript in a North American collection at the Walters. And then on the left, a manuscript for about 500 years later from Ethiopia. And these are both showing, so it's kind of a concordance of the Gospels, the beginning of any Gospel book, whether it's from Armenia, Ethiopia, Germany, England, doesn't matter, they all have it. And you'll see the decoration is very similar between the two. You get the same type of birds back and forth. You get interlaced. You get the same kind of column decoration as well in the archways. So very clearly, even though these books are 500 years apart, you get a lot of resonances between those two cultures, those two religions as well. So this wall actually represents where I kind of started with the exhibition, which was with painting. That's kind of where I come from. So painting and both on panel and manuscript illumination. In the 15th century, and actually beginning in the 14th century, Ethiopia starts to send envoys out to Europe. And so these are sort of diplomatic envoys, but also those envoys are bringing back things like icons, liturgical objects, things of that sort. Italian artists start to work at the Ethiopian court at that time in Lalibela. And so you have here a kind of wall of icons. This was kind of this sort of two niches in the middle kind of show those two traditions of painting. So we have a very traditional sort of Italian Renaissance arch around that Italian painting by, I'll actually move the slide ahead, but, and then on the left-hand side, you have, again, the Lalibela arch. You'll see this in the Lalibela churches in the windows. And here are the two paintings close up. So on the left, a painting by a documented Ethiopian artist at the court of Zara Yacob, named Seon. And also on the right, a painting from the workshop of Bartolomeo Vivarini, a Venetian painter. These date from about the same time period. Now, Vivarini did not go to Ethiopia and Feresian did not go to Venice, but I think you can see that resonance there in terms of the compositions, very similar virgin and child, same relationship between mother and child. However, the Ethiopian artist has taken it in a very different direction. So you have this incredible use of pattern. You have very long inscriptions on many of the figures. You also have the figures of Archangels Gabriel and Michael. This is absolutely crucial in any Ethiopian icon. And so in that wall, it's actually a genealogy. So, and I don't know if they'll do this at the Peabody Assets, but everything from here over artists and from here this way are Italian or European artists working at the Ethiopian court. And if you look at this case down here, you sort of were standing in front of it, you might be hard pressed to figure out which is which. What the story that was often told, even when I was first learning about this material, was that, you know, Italian artists come in and then the Ethiopians start painting icons and they're all copying from the Italian artists. And I think it really couldn't be any further from the truth. There's a conversation going on here. The Italian artists are using the Ethiopian palette. They're using a lot of the Ethiopian sort of visual, just how they depicted these subjects. We have a publication out with our paintings conservators and our conservation scientists about the materials and how they're sort of trading back and forth. And so in the exhibition, I think at the end of the Peabody Essex, we have some conservation stories as well. We have one of the oldest conservation departments in the US at the Walters, and we're also very privileged to have a conservation scientist as well. So this allowed us to really look into the materials and techniques of these artists. And actually becomes pretty clear which the Italian artists are and which the Ethiopian artists are once you start to do that analysis. So one of the questions we had was, do the Italian artists bring their own toolbox? They're using the local toolbox, so they're using local materials, but they're painting in a way that Italian artists paint, and the Ethiopian artists are painting in a different way in terms of how they build up the figures. So anyway, all very obvious, very spelled out in the catalog, and hopefully also in the exhibition as well. And here too, on this wall, what you probably noticed was another moment where we have contemporary art paired with the historic art. This is a photograph from the Museum of Modern Art in New York by Ida Moulinet. She is an incredible photographer. She actually trains and mentors a lot of younger artists and photographers in Africa. She has curated many different art fairs, not just in Ethiopia, but across Africa. And I just love this particular image by her because for me, it really evokes that image of the sort of all-powerful sort of Virgin Mary central there, even her blessing-like gesture, but also obviously bringing it very much up into present day and modern day sort of practices in Africa. I should also say that as a result of this being in the show, I want to say, the Peabody Essex they will have this on loan, but they also acquired about 6 other photographs by Ida Moulinet, which will be in the exhibition kind of throughout the show. So I'm really looking forward to seeing those. I haven't seen them in person before. So lots more to come from her. The red section of the exhibition is really sort of the kind of as you pass through that final archway, you would have gotten into the sort of more modern periods, the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, all the way up to the present day. This represents the moment where the capital city moves to Gondar in northern Ethiopia, and the Gondarine court is an incredible sponsor of the creation of artwork. So major crosses, icons, manuscripts, so forth and so on. Let's see what I have here. And in the Walters installation, we had against this red wall 2 photographs by, pieces by Helena Metaferia, who's actually a local born and raised in Maryland, graduate of Morgan State University in Baltimore. And she is very interesting in many ways, but she is very much referring back to historical Ethiopian art. I don't tend to work with living artists up until now. So, but what's great about working with living artists is you can actually have a conversation with them and ask them what they were thinking, what they were sort of their purpose in doing various things. So, Helena is, we don't have a close up of this, but if you see these in person, they're remarkable. They're actually collages. So she photographs women that she knows, African-American women she knows. And these 2 pieces are part of her headdresses series. So she is creating those headdresses out of archival photos that she's taken from various US civil rights era archives in the US. And she's made collages out of those. We've sort of played a little game of like spot Malcolm X, so she's in there a few times in these two particular pieces. But she's also referring to the crowns worn by Gondarine queens. And she actually has made some modern day examples herself of the actual crowns. They're very, very cool. So hope you spot her show objects in the show. She also she calls herself a very research-based artist, and I can attest to this because she was actually an intern at the Walters many years ago. So I knew her name before I knew her art because her work still appears in our curatorial files and the research that she did. Her father is also a professor at Morgan State University, Getachew Metaferia, and he in the exhibition has recorded a video about the subject of this painting, which is the Battle of Adwa. So many of you might be familiar with this particular battle that occurred in 1896. This is the first Italian invasion of Ethiopia, and you can see the Italian forces sort of coming in here, the Ethiopian forces going this way. And many of you will know the result of this is that the Ethiopian troops soundly defeated the Italians. They were expunged, and this painting is significant, and this moment is significant because it really embodies the fact and the concept that Ethiopia was never ever colonized. This is an incredibly important thing to know about Ethiopia. I remember when I was first talking about Christian art in Ethiopia to one of my former Walters colleagues, I was going to be doing a program for them, and we were sort of having our pre-discussions, and she said to me, well, you know, do you want to talk about like Christianity and colonization in Ethiopia? And I said, well, what are you talking about? And she assumed that it was because of colonization. So, well, first of all, Ethiopia was never colonized. Second of all, Christianity arrived in Ethiopia in the 4th century CE. So this is something that I think we need to uncouple in thinking. And many of you, I think I'm preaching to the choir here. Most of you will know this, but anyway, this is an important point to be made in the exhibition. And Getachew does an incredible job of explaining the meaning and the significance of the Battle of Adwa, which is commemorated every year on its anniversary, which is March 2nd, Gabe. Thank you. We just had it. It just happened. There were actually celebrations in Washington at the embassy. There were various sorts of. There was actually even the descendants of Haile Selassie still celebrate the Battle of Adwa, and they have a special medal that is devoted to the victory of Adwa. And I don't even think Gabe knows this, but I just received the medal of the victory of Adwa 3 weeks ago. So thank you. For me, it brings everything together. What I didn't mention about that Queen of Sheba story is that that connection with King Solomon, many of the kings that followed Menelik traced their lineage back to King Solomon in Ethiopia, all the way up through Haile Selassie in the 20th century, all the way through his descendants, including his grandson, Crown Prince Ermias today. So very significant to know those historical stories. They still have great resonance today. Okay, I'm wrapping, I swear. So here's the catalog, if you were to sort of lay it out flat. And I like this kind of view of the catalog. It contains essays by 30 different authors. I'll never do such a publication again, I'm hurting cats. This is like a half dust jacket. So I just bring this up because there's a very important piece that I can't believe I didn't bring up in the exhibition. And it is this piece that's portrayed on the cover here. It is a folding parchment fan that this is a sort of flat form, but if you splayed it out like this, it makes a big circular fan that was used in processions. So we actually made the dust jacket, that fan, you can actually take the dust jacket off, fold it up, and make your own fan out of it. So there's no instructions in there to do that, but I'm just kind of inside tip. So please check your local bookstores for this catalog. It's kind of a doorstop, but hopefully it will be a good resource sort of moving forward. And I do have just one picture from the Peabody Essex, and to make the big plug again, thank you again, Mark, for mentioning that the exhibition opens in a slightly more spread out form at the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts, not very far away. I will be there myself. I'll be giving tours on Saturday, a tour on Saturday, first come, first serve, 20 people, 11 a.m. to sort of kick off the show. And I hope you do travel to see it in its form there. And you can see they've actually used that fan as their kind of promo image as well. And I'll just put up all the dates of the exhibition on the screens. These were the Walters dates. You can put those out of your head. Peabody Essex dates. And then I will have a third venue at the Toledo Museum of Art in Ohio. So if you have friends, family there, plan to be traveling there, please do see it there. You'll see yet again another iteration of the show. So in the meantime, thank you all for coming.
Okay, Dr. Sciacca, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions and comments. We usually start inside the room and then go to Zoom land.
Okay.
Given that we have just about 35 minutes, could I ask if people could introduce themselves? Maybe we'll do 2 or 3 questions first and then give Dr. Sciacca a chance to answer. And who would like to begin in this room? Yes, sir.
Well, others will have more important questions than this, but let me just try one. And maybe, well, first of all, I very much appreciate everything you said, and I've learned a great deal.
Thank you.
I hope that gives me the leeway to ask one that might be a little bit of a challenge. Does it ever seem as though Ethiopia has been colonized religiously?
Not to me, being a medievalist, it does not. That's a short answer.
Going back? Going back
No.
and forward?
Yeah, I mean, I would say no. I mean, to me, studying Christian art for so long, the tradition in Ethiopia seems almost indigenous to me. So now there were certainly other religions practiced prior, and I didn't mention that here, to the arrival of Christianity. First of all, Judaism, we actually think that was one of the early forms of religion before Christianity in Ethiopia. Again, connections back to King Solomon. There are other local religions practiced as well. So there are many things circulated at the point of the arrival of Christianity, but I don't know. I wouldn't characterize it as a colonization situation.
So no hope whatsoever for future declaration of independence.
Of what?
Ethiopian Christianity, or religions like
Oh,
Islam,
yeah.
religions from outside.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, what is interesting to me about Ethiopia is, of course, there was conflict within, there is conflict within, but these religions have existed side by side for thousands of years. So I think in a way, it's kind of a model for how that can work. That would be my assessment. I don't know if others agree. I don't know, Gabe, if you agree, but so, there's always going to be conflict when you have differences of opinion, differences in belief, but I think it's a good example of how those religions have existed together in all their forms. So that'd be my.
Okay, thank you. Somebody start here, please.
Hi, I'm Cynthia.
Yes, Cynthia.
So, I just went to a panel online from the Newburgh Museum before
Oh,
coming
okay.
here,
Uh-huh.
and the whole panel was about restitution and repatriation.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I was going to
Yeah.
ask you, because
Mhm.
many of these objects are religious, is there
Yeah.
an effort to do any restitution, or people asking for some of these objects to be returned to Ethiopia?
Yeah.
And what is the position of your institution?
Yeah, so in the exhibition, there is actually a dedicated panel about the concept of provenance, because people, I think it's often kind of misunderstood sometimes, and people don't even, they hear that word, but they don't really know what it means. So explaining what it is, how it relates to Ethiopian art. I arrived, like I said, 7 years ago with an almost entire collection of Ethiopian art, and now it is left for me to try to find those threads that were lost, and they may be lost forever, but it's my job as a curator right now to try to trace that. Now we know who we got it from immediately, but where did it, how did they get it, right? And a lot of that information is unfortunately lost, but I'm doing my best to make that research, contacting dealers that, have given us or we've bought things from in the past, do that sort of thing. There's not been any sort of claim on this material, but for example, our director, Julia Marshari Alexander, is a big proponent of the AAMD, which is the Association of Art Museum Directors. They have a website where any objects that an institution has that are sort of questionable provenance or you have questions about, is to post them online and people can see for themselves and maybe give some additional information. It's kind of a way to crowdsource, because provenance research is incredibly difficult, and sometimes it takes years to find that nugget of information that you're looking for, or something comes to light. It's frustrating as a curator where you think you can sort of get the answer by researching things, and it's not that straightforward. So I continue to do my due diligence to kind of research what came before me and any acquisitions that I made, like this one. I mean, I came from the Getty, so I know all about like provenance research and triple checking everything. It is very difficult to acquire, and I think it should be difficult to acquire Ethiopian art today. So anything that we do acquire goes under a whole series of checks and balances. You have an incredible, long time provenance, head of provenance at the MFA Boston, here in Boston, Virginia. She's incredible. Museums are starting to hire people dedicated to that work because it is like a full-time job to do that provenance research. So I'm doing what I can, in addition to everything else, but there's not been any claims. And if I find something, I will absolutely make it public knowledge, and we can do that through the AAMD. We can do that through various channels that we have in the museum world. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our instructor in Amharic,
Oh,
we'll get to Zeki.
Nestle.
Salam.
Salam.
Thank you. I'm sorry I'm late. By the way, I'm originally, well, right now I'm in Ethiopian America,
Mhm.
but originally I'm an Agro.
Okay.
And I am from that dynasty. The Zawi
Amazing.
Dynasty.
You don't
Yeah.
even look that old.
And the first king of the Zawi dynasty was called Merra Tekla Haymana.
Yes, yes.
And the very famous king, the Rocky church.
Lalibela, yeah. Mhm.
Lalibela.
Yeah.
Lalibela means in Amazonia,
Mhm. Yeah. Mhm.
Lala means bee. Lala means carrier.
Mhm. Mhm.
Someone who carried the bee hives.
Yes,
That's what it
okay.
means.
Uh-huh.
He is a very famous king.
Mhm. That's right.
I think, as I said, I'm from that dynasty
Mhm.
originally. Well, thank you. I'm sorry I came late.
That's okay.
And then.
You said you came early.
He's the king of the
That's right.
Yeah.
It's our dynasty. We're going back now.
I'm from that family.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, probably I could have been one of the kings.
Maybe you still can be, I should note that there is a whole section about Lalibela in the exhibition, which I didn't show here, including an icon from our partner, the Toledo Museum of Art, which has a portrait of King Lalibela in it. Actually, it's a later
Yeah.
icon, but showing his impact because he was considered a saint after his passing, in addition to being a great king as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the European churches now, you have seen there, like, heading, I don't know,
Yeah.
where, whatever, to do our best. The Church of Beta
Theodis, yeah. Mhm.
This.
I've been there.
Really?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, I mean, and that, I hope in the exhibition, I know we had it at the Walters, we have, a shot of that because it's very famous. It's carved out of the living rock, but
Yeah.
it's very hard to wrap your brain around how it works unless you've been there. So what I usually do in the exhibition is I kind of show this path. You kind of begin on the normal ground level and you have to kind of go down this ramp and through a few tunnels and you come out in this
Yeah.
kind of underground courtyard. And the church is in front of you, and then you enter it just like any other church. But it's a real, I mean, it's incredible. This is a, 11th century church. It's
Yeah, can you tell me what we call the river of Jordan?
Oh, yes, that's right.
That goes
Yeah.
from Saint, the Savior
Yeah. Mhm.
to, have you seen that?
I have, because it's, what I didn't understand about this, it's a complex of 11 churches actually, and you kind of do one of these virtual pilgrimages, right? They're named after these holy sites, right? So you can actually do your virtual pilgrimage through the Holy Land. I see Gabe giving you the signal.
Well, I don't want to
yeah,
take your
yeah.
time, I will stop here, because that guy is German.
Yeah. Right, so there,
No, we'll get that. There are others.
yeah, there are many others.
But I'm glad he brought that up because I didn't feature that in the presentation, but it's absolutely important and crucial to the show. So thank you. And it's a non-Solomonic line of kings, actually. So this is not to forget about that. Yeah.
So actually, I'm going to cheat and go to Zoomland right
Mhm.
now because Professor Emeritus Jim McCann has a question. Jim, could you unmute yourself and jump in? Let's see if it works.
I think I'm unmuted. I hope you can hear me. One, I want to put your presentation
So far, no good.
in my response to it in the local dialect, which is, it is gorgeous.
All right, Jim, we can't hear you.
Are you muted on?
Yeah, we might be, did you mute all the folks?
I'm unmuted.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, here we go.
Can you hear me?
Please go ahead. Yes.
Okay, just to repeat what I just said is that as someone, I've worked in Ethiopia for 40 years, lived in and around and engaged with, but I want to say in our local dialect here in Massachusetts, I would say your exhibition is gorgeous. Beautiful things.
Like that too.
Cool.
And I hope to go to, I'm halfway right now where I am now, I'm halfway to Salem. So I look forward to seeing the exhibit. But one critique I would have is a common one, which is that this represents Semitic Ethiopia, the traditions of Semitic Ethiopia. And Ethiopia, of course, is a much larger conglomeration of cultures. You do mention that, but it does represent beautiful things, absolutely. The other thing I'll add to that is we just repatriated a document, early 19th century Dawit, which of course is the Book of Psalms, that we collected inadvertently at the African Studies Center, and we just donated it back to Ethiopia, received by the Institute of Ethiopian Studies, and they did a ceremony for the reception of receiving that back again. So it's possible to return things to the Institute of Ethiopian Studies or the National Museum. And Catherine, who's in the audience today, Catherine and Michael de Blasi, have worked on doing these kinds of collections of materials from Aksum. Long tradition to do that here in Ethiopia. So just want to compliment you on the beautiful nature of what you've done, and they bedem be a god young thing. I feel myself to be a god yummy. That's where I know best, but I've worked all over the country, and it is a wide range of interpretations. What you're offering here is a terrific example of one of those interpretations. So thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Professor McCann. I do appreciate that. And could I ask you when exactly that last year it happened, the repatriation? I'm asking for a reason.
Well, Mark, you were here at the ceremony. We had the
More than a year ago.
Yeah, it was more than a
It's,
year ago.
it's almost 2 years ago,
Okay.
and it happened right there.
time flies.
Was there there was a representative from the IES?
Yes, someone who is a professor of history of science, who was a Fulbright fellow with us. He was there for he carried it for us. It's not easy to carry these things privately, but now he donated it, and there was a ceremony in the Ras Makon Adrash, the university, for the reception of it. And so it is a beautiful piece, and it's something we were trying to figure out, how do we repatriate this? And we didn't find an exact life history of the document, but it is retained now and preserved in the Institute of Ethiopian Studies.
I think we repatriated it as carry-on.
Yes, this makes me give
Hard
me the
to
willies
believe.
as a
Hard to believe,
But
but it was a success. All
We
right,
had a
let's,
good soul who was willing to do that.
Yes.
And just to follow up on that, what I didn't mention was that, in fact, the Institute of Ethiopian Studies is our major lender to the exhibition. That is, you'll see 13 objects from the IES on loan to the exhibition. And so, you know, they have an incredible wealth of materials that many people don't really know about there. And it's very interesting to hear that joined the collection as well. So I'd love to hear even more about that, or some images of the Psalter would be great to see. So thank you for telling me that. Great, thank you.
Terrific. So thank you again.
next.
Thank
Dr.
you,
Mali.
Because I have to rush out
Mhm.
here to class. Very simple question for me. I may have misheard this. You
Mhm.
said something about the Ark of the Covenant
Yes,
having been there. Did you
yes.
say it was there or it is there?
Well, that is the question.
You saw the movie.
I did not see Indiana Jones while I was any of my travels in Ethiopia.
So
It is thought to be in that church. Now the problem is there is no access to that church. So I think, you know, being a medievalist and dealing with things like relics and reliquaries, you know, the importance is that what is believed rather than what is or is not. So it is believed to be there. Yeah.
It is believed that proper term, yes.
Yeah.
Eva, please.
Yeah, I really appreciate this presentation, and like Cynthia, I was at our virtual conference earlier, and the session that's happening now that we're not attending is about the community involvement in exhibitions of African art.
Yeah.
So I would love for you to expand more on what you did and how you recruited people and in what capacity they were involved in display decisions.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. This is something that we are now doing for many of our exhibitions at the Walters. And this, my committee was actually the first developed, but we just sort of concluded now. There have been others since with our, we had a new installation of Asian art. We consulted with an advisory committee for that. Also my colleague who is displaying for the first time the Ancient Americas has her own advisory committee drawn from the community as well. I took some, this is something new that we were doing. So it was a lot of it was, we have an entire department dedicated to learning and community engagement, which used to be formerly known as the education department at the Walters. But that the name shift represents what they feel is their mission today, which is to reach out to the community. So that committee was developed in 2021 was our first meeting. And I was able to, I kind of took a cue from what I had done at the Getty, which is sort of identify the major stakeholders who are interested in having a conversation about things like exhibitions, highlight those people. And then a former colleague of mine at the Walters had a great idea, which was find, say, 5 of those people and then give all of them a +1. So they then reach out to their network. So I know a small group, I had come from LA, into Baltimore trying to get to know the community, but they know their networks and who would be the most invested. So that's how we built our committee, about 10 to 12 people. And I tried to keep it as diverse as possible. So not just Ethiopian Christians, also Muslim Ethiopians, and bringing in people from all sides. We even had a Lutheran Ethiopian as well. So, and like I said, from all kind of walks of life, but all very invested in Ethiopian art. The first video that is featured in the exhibition actually has self-filmed clips of several of those people, like 30 seconds, film yourself in your own space. And almost every single one, they have a piece of Ethiopian art behind them in their office or their home, wherever they're filming. They are, steeped in this from birth. So this was absolutely crucial to me. What we did was we had several meetings. My intention was for them to come to the Walters and actually look at how we display our permanent collection of Ethiopian art and give some critique about that. And then we were in the middle of the pandemic, so that didn't happen. So it was all over a Zoom meeting, the multiple meetings that we had, and just trying to getting their feedback. Some were even more invested than others. I was on the phone, every week with my buddy Aziz Zakaria, who is the brother of Ahmed Zakaria, who was the former chief curator at the IES, the Institute of Ethiopian Studies. He lives in Silver Spring. His brother is in Ethiopia. He lives in Silver Spring, Maryland, and is part of the Ethiopian Muslim community. And he's featured in our videos as well. So just to really try to have as meaningful as possible an engagement and to really listen. And this is what we should all be doing, I think, really for every exhibition. And so we're kind of started on that path. Also very important to us was to compensate our committees. But again, that requires, I could do that because I received 2 major NEH grants for this exhibition, and not every, we just need to plan better. I think we should plan better moving forward because budgets are budgets. And so that was all the result of getting those major government grants for this show. That was part of what we did with that money.
Okay. Yes, please.
I just crossroads. I'm wondering, you're talking about this spread of manuscripts, Islamic manuscripts to West Africa.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could theorize or think. I'm just wondering about sort of ways things are traveling, any sort of east to west.
So I was hoping to explain more of the east to west and more of the sort of internal to Africa, because that's really never talked about in relation to Ethiopia. I was able to sort of find the path north. So you'll see in the catalog, we have the connections with ancient Nubia, Coptic Egypt, obviously, of course, sort of was the mother church of Ethiopia up until 1959. Sorry. So I actually spoke with Kathleen Bickford-Burzog, who did the Caravans of Gold show, because she was thinking of trans-Saharan communication, from sort of sub-Saharan Africa to Europe. And we tried to kind of make our paths, meet together. Now we know that they were paths between the two, but those land routes are much more arduous. So, and I think that's why, because of Ethiopia's situation, it had so many water routes, and that's why that travel was so fluid. So, I would like to find more direct connections, sort of east-west. They're harder to kind of pinpoint in terms of the artworks. But that was my goal. I had it from the beginning. It was to talk about that. And we know what must have happened. You know, Mansa Musa was traveling, right, you know, from where he was to Mecca, and, you know, so things of that sort. So harder to kind of show it visually, but was not far from my brain.
Professor Shipson?
Thank you.
I have a problem because both of the names are last names.
I accept Dr. Shipton, Clarker, however it comes out. And Shipley Parkdale, you know, you call it. A linguistic question. The word art focuses attention on aesthetics. Among the 15 other things it could be focusing our attention on in cases like these.
Yeah.
So what else might we call what we're looking at, and what languages, terms, or term might we pick that could give us a broader understanding of it? Are there ways in which, as some have spoken of, say, cave paintings in Southern Africa, we might call it a window to another dimension, or an access route, or maybe we just should be talking about relics, or how about a term like things?
I'm, you know, an art historian, so, you know.
So who cares about all that?
Well, I mean, so.
Sacred art, like.
Yeah.
all by-
Or, I mean, you know, you're asking linguistically, right? Ours is making, right? It's the act of making. So that is what I hope. What I've always found, you know, I can talk about artsy fartsy the whole time, but every question, every tour I've ever given of any exhibition I've done, people always want to know, how is it made? What materials are they using? What is the artist doing? That may be part of our sort of modern mentality of thinking of sort of the artist as being the primary person, but of course, these are very skilled people at what they did. And so,
Artifact is so archaeological.
nope.
Some of it is you have to give the objects respect. And
Yeah.
to classify them as art puts them on level with Europe. And how we look at European
That's
art.
complicated though
And
as
do
well.
we
as
want
need
that,
to-
do we want that hierarchy?
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you
Or
use
does it need to be
a
checked out the window?
thing, then you are reinforcing this hierarchy.
Yeah.
That's what I would argue.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were decisions made, you know, by me about what is included and what is not included, you know, and what sort of materials, you know, it's interesting to see the full gamut of what is produced in Ethiopia and what of that winds up in art museums and what does not, right? And that has to do with collecting history, and I think that's changing a lot now. And I know even at the Walters, we're thinking differently about the types of objects we collect, and things that weren't necessarily seen as art before are important parts of material culture. So, you know, it's shifting over time, I would say. But yeah, I would go back to making and thinking about, you know, it's a person making that, right? Who is now lost to us. But you know, I think that's what it comes down to. To answer your question. I'm looking at your face.
I think of Africa as a continent where life doesn't always everywhere get partitioned into religious places, art places, education places, but things are scrambled around wherever people are.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And in people's homes and in every sort of space. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna all be thinking about this question for the rest of our lives, I think. I see Catherine Bard has her hand up from Zoom land. If you unmute yourself, we'll see if we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
A bad start.
Okay.
Try again?
Can you hear me?
Yes, please speak loudly.
Okay. Mike de Blasi, Rodolfo Panovich, and I excavated at Beta Diorbis Aksum for 10 years. And the evidence that we have of the process of Christianity suggests that it was a top-down process that took place over about 2 centuries. Ezana, in his inscriptions, we record that he adopted Christianity as his religion, but we don't see crosses in the pottery until 100, 200 years later. So it was definitely a top-down process of Christianization in the kingdom.
Agreed. I'm not going to debate you on that. One thing that was interesting, if you refer to, Aaron Butts wrote the essay about Aksumite coinage in the catalog, and this whole shift in the symbolism where you get the cross placed on the coins. The way he traces it, the gold coins with the cross so prominent on them are the ones that were actually exported. So it's you know, top down, and it's also part of that messaging to abroad that we are a Christian nation. Whereas the local, the silver, the copper alloy coins that were used on the ground in Ethiopia, that's much less sort of in your face, if you will. So that would seem to support your point. You know, there's also that gap where we don't really know, you know, sort of this period after the Aksumite Empire, before the Zagwe dynasty, that, you know, we don't really know what's, you know, happening there. But that Christianity did persist and was, of course, adopted by those, or continued by those Zagwe kings, and then, of course, moving forward. So, and I didn't hear where you said you excavated. I'm sorry, you were breaking up a bit.
We excavated for 10 years at Beta Georgis Aksum, which is just to the north of Central Creek. And Solange Ashby, who wrote the chapter in this book, she consulted with me about our exhibit.
Excellent. Yeah. Solange wrote a great essay, for those of you who don't know, in the catalog about ancient Nubia and the relationship between Ethiopia and ancient Nubia. So thank you for consulting with her.
Okay, I'm afraid we're coming down to the end here a little bit, and I see that Tim Weiskull has a question. If you would like to ask it, or I can read what you've written. But if you unmute yourself, please go ahead, and then we'll see if there are any last questions after that.
Okay, quick question. Fantastic presentation. There's so much in what you've talked about that is historical narrative in some sense, that it's a representation of events and people, personages. There's also the question of what's the difference between art and history, because there's a temptation on the part of a lot of African art specialists to read art as if it's some sort of historical narrative. Now, in effect, you'd fall into that with this Ethiopian tradition. But say, for example, if you were trying to deal with things in the Congo, or with the Ashanti tradition or whatever, it's a mistake to deal with everything as if it's historical narrative. It may well be a different kind of iconography that we should be working on. And I'm curious, you must have encountered this as a dilemma constantly in Ethiopian art, because so much of it is grounded in historical argumentation, you might call it, or narrative. Do you have any suggestions for the rest of us who are at sea in this area?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I agree with you. I'll leave it there. As a medievalist, we have so few historical, if you will, documents. And as we know, history has the word story in it. So it's, whose story is that? Who wrote that down? Who documented that? And why did they say what they said? It's a perspective. So it is not a fact, it is a perspective. As a medievalist, some of my only documents are the objects that come down to us. I don't have a historical written out, this is why this artist did this, this is why this patron commissioned this thing. So for me, and why I got into art history, was because those objects are in fact documents. So you're talking about, I'm assuming the objects that you're talking about from Congo and so forth, what period are you speaking about?
We can't hear you.
Himself.
We can't hear you.
Anyways,
We're just about coming to the end.
my thought is simply that you might be referring to more modern day objects where perhaps we have more record, you know, as it is.
Actually, I'm referring to both sides of the artistic moment, as it were. Both the Europeans and the Africans are representing one another as icons. they are not photographs, right? These are not photographic encounters, and we're not looking at images that are in some sense frozen. They are, as you just argued, I think very persuasively, accounts. They're arguments, they're statements. Europeans are the same way in representing African art, African accounts and maps, for example, which are stuffed with images of Africans, usually in the cartouche or in the side drawings and the like. But they only can be understood not as photographs, but as icons. So it's the study of comparative iconology that's really quite interesting here. And it seems to me your field could lead the way in this, because you've got to deal with that at the outset. That's what they were intended as to begin with.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Okay, I think we're just about done, but I see that Professor Jim McCann's hand is up again. And so a short question, and then we'll certainly give Dr. Sciacca the last word. Jim, do you have a question?
Yeah, just one observation. Could you go back, Christine, could you go back to the Solomon and the Mekda Sheba image? I just want to point out something.
Oh, here we go. I'll get there. I'll get there. There we are.
Okay, look at the panel on the left, section from the bottom. When we talk about Zagwe, the dynasty that founded Lalibela, Lalibela himself, whose name means La Liberal, whose relationship to bees, Lal. So he is the one that drinks from the bees, but that is the origins of the Zagwe dynasty is attributed to that image where Solomon, before he takes and tricks Makeda, Sheba, he seduces her servant. And that's the origin claimed. I did my research on Lasta, on Lalibela, my dissertation. And I've interviewed priests and people from the area. And that fits into your story. It's not to correct what you're saying, it's just to add an element to it. So when the Yukuna Amlak reestablishes the Solomonic dynasty, it's in contradiction to that image, which is a very public airport art kind of image. You'll see that down the hallway where you are now, we have the same iconographic representation of that. So you just add that to your story if you like.
We're going to be looking for it in just a minute.
Thank you. I would love to see that. Thank you for pointing that out. Appreciate
Will
it.
Gates may have disagree or not, but that is the image.
He says he agrees.
All right, so I hate to say it, but I think we're just about running out of time. Dr. Sciacca,
Okay.
would you like to close with any words about the exhibit or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that 3 months, which is the duration of the exhibition at the Peabody Essex, is very short. It'll be over before you know it, so don't sleep on it. And please do pick up the catalog and tell your friends and family because, you know, obviously I'm biased, but it was an incredible reaction from the community in Baltimore and from, you know, I had people coming to see it 3-4 times. We are also a free museum, so that helps. And when the exhibition is over, we will reinstall our Ethiopian collection. So please do, and I have to think about how to do that. If we want to change it up a little bit. And also currently we have on view a piece by the artist Side Makonnen, who's a DC-based artist, Ethiopian American. She was actually, I didn't mention this, slipped my brain, I don't know why. She actually wrote the labels for the contemporary pieces in the exhibition, and you'll see her words also at the Peabody Essex. So we have her piece on view in our Ethiopian galleries right now because we pulled most of the historic material out for this exhibition. So come back and visit us. We are always free. Our exhibitions are always free, and please do go to the Peabody Essex to see the show there.
Okay.
Oh, Gabe, yeah.
Gabe, please.
Just on the exhibition.
Yeah.
For those of you, we have arranged a visit. The Arts Initiative has the ticket, group ticket,
Oh.
especially students.
When is that?
You can give your name and then there's also a bus I think leaving on Saturday from here.
Oh.
So it's this Saturday?
Yeah.
This Saturday.
Because of the students, there's a lot of interest in among the students that go. So if you have students, you can get that student discount, but BU Arts Initiative already gets, so that will be part of that. The BU staff and I think it's free. Because we will have that. You can join on the day it is open or
okay.
on other days. not even affiliated, I have also arranged it with the community group, your family is from your community. There's also another group ticket, arranged for the Ethiopian community.
Okay,
That's
that is wonderful.
fantastic. That's great. I expect to see all of you there on Saturday.
I hate to call an end to this. Obviously, you have provoked a lot of thought, and you've also just exposed us to a lot of beautiful work that you're presenting in the exhibit, which we all appreciate. Dr. Christine Sciacca, thank you very much. So to all of you who are interested in things related to Africa, we still have a full slate of things coming up. At 4 p.m. today, there's going to be something called Research on Tap, Boston University and Africa. That's going to be at the Killichan Center at 610 Com Ave. So please come by for that. On April 19th, I'd like to remind everyone that the University of Massachusetts at Boston is going to have its Africa Day, which is a full day from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. Devoted to a focused subject, democratic backsliding in West Africa, but there'll be plenty of other things going on there as well. On April 22nd, there will be another Rodney lecture in this room, conducted by one of our very own, Josh Castillo, on navigating Lingala, linguistic capital, political power, and social mobility in Congo Zaire. It's a hot topic, I can tell you that for sure. And then following that, let's see, what else have we got? On April 24th, there will be a film screening on stealing. Let's see, what does this say? Stealing and Nation?
Yeah.
From Mauritius?
Yeah, that's about Chagos Island. There will be a discussion and then there will be a film. And before that, Ambassador, I give you that. That's this coming Thursday. There's a Moroccan film about Moroccan food.
Oh, wow.
There's a flyer right there.
My apologies, I didn't mention it. So it's April 11th at 5 p.m. in Mughar Library, the best library for African studies running. And then I think we will be coming close to closing out. No, we won't be coming close. We will close out our Walter Rodney seminar series on April 29th, which is another Monday, with Cecile Fromont, who's going to be speaking on history and the fetish. Who wants to miss that one? It goes on the Del Commune in Kisi as historical object. So sounds very interesting. All right, thank you all for coming out today, and thank you, Dr. Sciacca. Okay.
Now, what do I do here?
I feel like
I think you should